is on Skype. And let me tell you something. If you were to marry the Deftones with Alter Bridge and they were to have a baby, you would get Black Orchid Empire. This London-based group is filled with melodic beauty, savage riffs, and complex grooves that will make your head spin. And at the same time, make Chino Moreno envious. About this gig. They're about to release their brand new album, Semaphore, this Friday, and we're going to chat with their leader and find out why this group matters in the world of heavy metal. So please help me welcome Black Orchid Empire frontman and guitarist, Mr. Paul Visser. How you doing, Paul?
Yo, I'm good, man. How are you doing, Brandon?
I'm doing well. I am trying to stay sane, for sure, if you know what I mean.
That is a good idea. And not as easy as you might think.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know what? Speaking of sane, Paul, I got to ask, how have you been doing during this quarantine effect? And how's London doing right now?
It's crazy. So I've been doing fine. You know what? Like, people ask me that question, and I think about, it being a challenge. And I think it's not a challenge because, like, I could be like a doctor, or I could be working on like a front line somewhere, and I'm totally fine with everything that's happened so far because I'm just locked up in my house and I have my guitars here and I'm just in a small room, so I'm fine. It's been a crazy experience, but I've kind of been okay with it. It's I don't know. I feel for people that have been on the front line though. Seriously.
And I can see the line of guitars that you got behind you. Is that a Strat on your the wooden Strat on the right?
Well, so they kind of look left-handed in the video, right? But they are actually right-handed. No, that's a Jericho Telly, and this is a Solar guitar, which is the GC design. That's a company I've just started working with, and they're amazing. So, Ola Englund is a fantastic guitarist. It's his company.
Yeah, I've actually heard these guitars being performed. They're actually very solid.
Yeah, they're amazing. So yeah, we just started working with those guys. So that's kind of exciting.
It's just too bad the bass guitars are so pricey. When I looked at them and I was like, oh Jesus, I can't do that.
Okay, so you're a bass player. Yeah, it's I think they're just basses are just one of those things, man. People tend to have like one bass that they love forever because it's a big investment, man. It's a big deal. I mean, instruments are kind of an addiction, so it can be tricky.
Oh, I know. I mean, I just bought myself the Nicky 6 Schecter bass, and I'm already looking at my next bass already.
How many do you need? You need one more.
If anything, yeah, one for metal and one for like everything else, if you know what I mean.
Well, the thing is, so yeah, it's tricky because when we tour, I have two tunings I use. So I kind of have like my main guitar and my backup guitar for each tuning. But that means I need to tour with 4 guitars, which is ridiculous. And like Dave has 2 basses. So it ends up being a pretty crazy trailer. But what are you going to do? Yeah,
what are you going to do? We're musicians. It's our habit.
It's our addiction. Yeah, exactly.
Our addiction, even better. So you call your group Black Orchid Empire. Mm-hmm. Why did you guys call yourselves that name? Is there a special meaning behind it?
I think it's just lost in the mists of time. So the three of us have been playing together for a long time. I've been working with Billy since like 2003 in different projects, and we had a band that was called Cape Fear that Dave ended up joining, and then that kind of disbanded, came to an end, and we became BOE. And honestly, I'd love to have like a 6 story for it, but I don't remember. It came about like people just jamming words together, and somebody, I can't remember who said it, maybe Bill's. It's just one of those weird things where it was just something that sounded kind of cool, and it doesn't. I should have like different stories for everybody that asks. That would be way better. I'm going to start inventing new stupid stories for how it came about. That would be a better idea.
Well, that's fine. You kind of build the myth behind it.
Yeah, I do. I need to work on the mythology. That's very true. Yeah, no, you know what, though? I think everybody who's ever been in a band is going to remember the meetings that they used to have and the text chat and stuff that they used to have to try and figure out what the name should be. And it's always like a nightmare. It's the only thing that's worse is having to audition new members in a band. Anyone that's in a band is going to know what that's like, and it sucks. It's just that difficult thing.
I know. When I interviewed Elise Ride and I asked her about the name Amaranthi when she joined, she's like, I don't know the origin of the name because I joined later on. You'll have to ask the guitar player.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it was just, we were probably just drunk. I don't know. It's who knows?
Wait, there's nothing wrong with being drunk and naming the band. A lot of guys have done it.
That's how it works. I think it's difficult to do it any other way.
For all we know, Aerosmith could have been high at the time when they came up with their name.
I'm almost certain of that, yeah.
I mean, if you read their book, they did some pretty nasty shit with drugs.
Yeah, I think they were. It's very possible.
Yeah. So how did you hook up with David and Billy?
So like I said, I met Bill a long time ago, and it was because he was producing a band I was in at the time. So it was a very interesting relationship because he was producing me, and then when that band split up, I was like, we should totally do something together. And he'd been in a bunch of bands. He was in a band called Queen Adrena that were really cool, and he toured with Deftones and Nine Inch Nails and Incubus and all these guys. And he was like, hell no. And then I was like, well, okay. I basically had to wear him down over a long time because he'd been through this quite a big thing. He played some big shows and the band had split up and he was really jaded on it and he didn't really want to do it. He just wanted to produce other stuff. So I had to really wear him down. But I eventually must have done that. I think he just kept giving me tasks like, go and do this, go and do that. And then I came back and I was like, I've done it. And eventually it kind of came together. And then we started rehearsing. That was a different band. And we found Dave through like an online thing called Star Now, which is basically Tinder for guitarists. He was he just arrived for an audition, like nailed every part, nailed every BV, and me and Billy were like, this is going to work. Okay, let's just do this. That band kind of came to an end, and then we together decided to start a three-piece project, which became Black Orchid Empire. So this is like 2012, 2013. We've been around for a little while. We did tons of work all on our own, DIY completely. Released our whole first album that way. We set up our own record label and our own recording studio and all those other things. And then it wasn't until our second record, Jugend, that we signed with Long Branch in Germany, part of SPV in Germany. And then that's obviously the label that are releasing Semaphore. So it's been a long journey together. We're not newcomers to this game.
It's a long journey that's bared really sweet fruit for you guys. I mean, your debut album reached commercial and critical success, especially with it hitting over 1 million streams. I mean, you've got to be proud of that.
Yeah, everything we've achieved so far has been amazing. I mean, to put it into perspective, though, the level of it's always like a slow build, and we're really finding that even the singles we've released so far, because Semaphore isn't out until Friday the 12th of June, but we've already had nearly 200,000 streams on the singles. So people are really getting behind this new thing, and it's really exciting to see. But yeah, we've achieved some amazing things. I've had the best time of my life already with these guys, and I think it's going to just go up from here, which is really cool. Yeah,
you got the new album coming out, Semaphore, if I said it right.
You did.
Oh, thank God. Okay, it's Semaphore, and it's got a sci-fi concept behind it. So what can we expect from this album? And are any of you guys like a big fans of sci-fi?
Yeah, well, we all are really. It was a conscious choice to create a concept for the album that gave us the freedom to do something different, because it's quite challenging as a songwriter and as a lyricist to constantly talk about your own experience directly all the time. That works to an extent, and then you get the feeling maybe you're just making this stuff up now, and then it becomes inauthentic, so it's a problem. If you create a narrative that's completely outside of your own experience, it's just related to amazing books you've read and amazing films you've seen and amazing series you've watched, and you start to draw influences from a different genre outside of music even. It's just, it's its own thing. You get a lot of freedom because you can start talking in much bigger terms about issues that affect all of us and are really interesting, but they're not directly linked to your own experience. So it was definitely a conscious choice, and we're all huge fans of the genre, and it's based on all my favorite authors and all my favorite movies and all that stuff. And it's just fun. It's just super fun to do.
Well, I know, speaking of sci-fi, I got to ask you, are you a Star Trek guy or are you a Star Wars guy? Now, mind you, I can stop this interview anytime I want, so careful.
Well, it's okay because I'm both. So it's fine. Star Wars is like the most important thing to me. Like, it's growing up, it was the obviously the original movies that the period I grew up in. My parents were super familiar with them, and then they all got re-released at the cinema when I was a kid, and it was like a remaster. The remaster.
Same here.
Yeah. So like the remaster was kind of dodgy in some ways, but it really opened up the franchise to a whole lot of other people. So I think it was interesting, and I've been following it ever since, and I've loved some of it, and I've not loved some of it, as everyone else has. Star Trek, though, equally was really important, and even in the 60s, it was doing really interesting, progressive stuff that most of the stuff in that series is now like real. You know, like the fact that we're having a video conversation right now, we're in different countries, was not possible when it was made. You know, all those kinds of things. Yeah, so I think it was really interesting, and I've been rewatching some of the Next Generation stuff recently, and like, it's just good stories, and that's what we're trying to do with this record. Is it's about having a story and having an interesting narrative that people will get into. So for this album, each song has its own separate story, which is obviously portrayed in the lyrics. But I've also written a short story as well for each song, which we're going to start releasing. So when the album's been out for a little while, we're going to start dropping those stories as well. And you'll be able to see from a different point of view the kind of narrative of that song, which I think is quite cool because we've never done anything like that before. And sometimes songs are quite restrictive. You have to be super serious, and you have to, things like rhyming are a thing. You know, when you're writing a story, you can be way more detailed, and you have lots more images. So it was a good opportunity to be able to do some interesting things. Yeah,
and you were talking about how each song is kind of like a chapter in this whole concept, and from each chapter, from Singularity to Natural Selection, Red Waves, Winter Keeps Us Warm, Evergreen. Now, I'm sure each song is very personal to you in that sense, but which song do you think really spoke to you when you first wrote it?
They all did in different ways because they were written over a decent amount of time. Winter Keeps Us Warm definitely came together the quickest, and it was the easiest flow of any of the songs. My favorite song on the record is probably Motorcade, which is the one it goes on a really interesting journey for me, where so everything we do is about being technical and heavy and complex and all those things and powerful, but retaining loads of melody and having real sing-along, like melodic songs. And Motorcade, I feel, is a really good example of how you can do both those things, where the chorus is like a big sing-along chorus, but the verse is I wrote the verse melody in like iambic pentameter. It's 10 syllables per verse. It's proper like Tool crazy stupid shit. And then it has this called breakdown section in the middle that goes completely different texture, and then this riff comes in. It's like my favorite moment, where it's sharpen your knives. When that bit comes in, it's like a massive techie kind of riff. So it blends everything we do as a band in one song in a way that I feel is really satisfying.
Yeah, and I was just, right before this interview, I was actually listening to Evergreen again, the first single. And when you got to the main riff, like the solo part, I guess you could call it a solo.
It
kind of reminded me a lot of Soundgarden in a sense, like something from like Outshine or Burden in My Hand. Because that riff kind of reminds me of like what Cornell and Kim Thiel created, which was masterful. Was that what you were trying to go for?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Soundgarden. I think Super Unknown is probably one of the most important records to me.
Which one did you like more? I'm sorry, I gotta ask you: Super Unknown or Bad Motorfinger?
I knew you were going to ask those two. It's Super Unknown for me, but music is something that it's about right time, right place. And if you find a record and it really resonates with you, it will always have a special place, no matter what else is in the catalog. And I think that's why a lot of people get obsessed with like some random old EP that a band did 10 years before they became famous, because it's the one they heard and it resonated with them at that time. And the band are there going like, this isn't our best work. What are you talking about? But for that person, it means something. And I'm not alone.
Because it was raw. It was like real. It meant something.
Yeah, for sure. And for me, the thing about Super Unknown is the freedom of exploration and the songwriting. I mean, I don't think it came easy. From what I've heard, it took a long time of demoing songs and throwing things backwards and forwards before they came up with that. It was a pretty arduous process. It wasn't an easy record to make by all accounts, but I just think it's just an example of a band who know what they're trying to do and they are allowed the space to do it. And that meant something. So yeah, it's fantastic. And Chris Cornell is obviously like one of the best vocalists who's ever lived. And that means something as well. I don't know. It's funny when we wrote that section, a lot of what we do is we call it riff farming. We'll basically come up with an idea, and then someone else in the band will fuck with it somehow and like take a bit out, put it over here, and somebody else will tweak it, and it'll start off kind of like it's going to end up, but it will just have these little tweaks along the way. And that solo section is a really good example where Dave wrote that on the bass, that section. And then Billy took out a couple of beats, and that made it into that 9/4 groove, which it is, and it's super crazy. And then I just basically put a mad guitar part on top because it was all I could do. But the actual sort of structure of it wasn't planned to be as crazy as it ended up. And then the demo of that is kind of straightforward for a really stupidly complex part of a song, but Billy's performance when he recorded the drums was insane, and he did some mad like beat inversion stuff, and the end result, you just don't even know what's going to happen. Every bar seems like something crazy happens, even though you can still, our whole rule of thumb is make it as crazy as you want, but still nod your head all the way through. That's the key thing.
Oh yeah, just follow through with the music.
Yeah, exactly. So as long as you're not left nodding up, then you're fine.
Yeah. Now, in the middle of the album, you have a song called "Hello Pause," which is a short little musical interlude. It's very melancholy, and it's got a little haunting piano overtone. What is its main purpose in Semaphore? Why'd you guys want to do a little short instrumental interlude?
Cool. So to correct you there, it's Heliopause, which is
Heliopause. Excuse me.
And it's named after the theoretical limit of the solar system, where things stop being under the effect of the gravity of the sun. So that's kind of a cool thing. It's literally like a palate cleanser, because after Red Waves, we wanted to go into Winter Keeps Us Warm when we laid out the whole record, because obviously you don't write the songs in the order they appear, you write them differently, and then you have to put them in an order that makes sense, and there's lots of options. It really works in terms of the journey of the record, but we were like, this, it can't just go from this to this and make sense. It had to have a connecting thing in there somewhere. So the first thing we had was I just wrote that little piano piece that you hear, and then we found a few days later we found some, I think it's like a bomb test warning in Russian or something. It's strange, and it's just this weird, creepy kind of Chernobyl style sounds over the top of it. It's just there as a way of telling you the first half of the album is ending and we're now into the second half. Because for me, an album, I still listen to all my music in album form. I can't really listen to one song at a time. I have to get it in context because I'm kind of old. And it made a lot of sense to me that it would be a journey that had like kind of two halves to it. I mean, we're very much in the sci-fi film kind of realm, so it makes sense to have like acts. But yeah, that was just basically a marker to say this is the next section now.
Yeah, I figured that was what you were going for. And I'm actually, I think like you, when it comes to albums, I like to listen to the whole album itself, because not just the singles, but I feel like each song gives you a little something different. Like I was recently listening to Red Hot Chili Peppers' Mother's Milk, really for the first time, really getting into it, and I was really hooked on this one last song that was not a single. It was Johnny Kick a Hole in the Sky, because that infectious bass groove that Flea was playing and the whole rapping from Titus, it was just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And so I was like thinking, thank God they did not put that as a single. And I feel like I respect artists a lot who keep some of the best ones on the record and not out there as a single, because that way people can go and discover them.
I would say that I love all the singles, but some of my favorite songs on Semaphore are not singles. So there's still plenty of stuff for people to go and investigate. We did a lot of singles. There's been 4 so far, and there's going to be Singularity that comes out on Friday as part of the album launch. But I still think hearing them in context, especially because of the kind of concept of the record, is going to be really interesting for people. So I'm very excited to see what people think.
Yeah, same here. And I've loved hearing this record. So, so I read that you got a few dates coming up this fall in the UK, if they're still in effect, right?
We certainly are at the time of recording. We're just going to keep an eye on that. I'm pretty confident that'll all be fine in October, November time. And then we also have, we're going out with Exist Immortal, who are great in the UK. And then we have some EU dates in February in Germany and Holland. And then we are definitely going to come and see the US, because we just started working with a really good USA agent, TKO. So we're going to definitely be out your way next year for sure.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if you guys are planning on coming over here. And now you're going to make a stop in the Orange County, LA region.
Yeah, we'd love to. I mean, so Billy's from the States, obviously, and he did live in LA for a while as well. So we're going to try and hit all those places for sure.
Oh, well, that's exciting to know. So I got time for a couple more questions, really quick. Between COVID-19 and the George Floyd protests that have been happening, because I know that the protests have somehow gone over to the UK.
For sure.
So your personal intake on it, what would you take away from everything that we have been through so far in 2020? Do you think that we will come out better as better people, or do you think, it can lead down to something, I wouldn't say dark, but something a little less positive?
It's a good question. I think there's 2 separate things happening, and one is probably partly kind of exacerbated by the other, but certainly the situation with a global pandemic is something that no one's ever seen before, although a lot of people have predicted, especially in the world of fiction and sci-fi and movies. We've all seen this movie before, man. So I'm kind of like,
you know what? The Simpsons predicted it back in the 90s.
They did. Of course they did.
I mean, they predicted Donald Trump becoming president. They predicted Disney owning Fox. And I'm like, do they have a time machine? They come right back and write down the episode?
I feel like they must have done. So I think, look, the pandemic thing has been crazy, and I think undoubtedly we will recover from that. I think it will change the way we see the world forever, and I think probably for the better, because we'll realize what's really valuable, and we'll realize who we really needed when that happened. And I think I see people who deliver stuff to my door in a very different way than I did before, and that kind of thing. I think that's huge for me. That's a real shift in perspective. To touch on the other topic you're talking about, I think what we're seeing right now is a shift in understanding of what prejudice means, essentially, and the fact that you can distill the entire topic into one simple idea, which is prejudice is not something you are born with. You have to be taught that prejudice if it exists in your life. And I feel like you would have to question the motives of somebody who taught you to hate other people and taught you to be prejudiced against other people, because they're probably doing it for a reason that serves their own interests and not yours or those other people. And I think the other thing is, if you find yourself in a position where you're becoming aware of your own prejudice, or you're becoming aware of other people's prejudice for the first time, or you're already aware of it, it's if you act in a way that's prejudiced against other people, you are robbing them of freedom, but you're more importantly robbing yourself of freedom, because it's a knee-jerk reaction before you know somebody. You're judging them on an arbitrary characteristic, not on any evidence of their actions or the way they speak. And that is something that will never be a positive thing, because you're giving away your ability to judge somebody on how they are and what they do and their actions, instead of just judging them in advance. It doesn't serve anybody. I think the main thing is no situation will never change. So at some point, things will change. And I think as long as we all can concentrate on the things that we love and the things that are important to us and the things that really mean something to us and that really matter to us, and we can let go of the things that are distractions from that and let go of being controlled by other forces other than our own will, which is very, very common these days. Things are becoming more and more common. Then I think everything will come out the other side better people. So it's a very, very, very complicated issue, and I wouldn't be in a position where I could have like a really informed opinion about some things. I wouldn't go there, but I just think in general, we don't need to judge people before we know them. It can't be a good thing, you know. And that's kind of simple.
Yeah, and that's a very articulate answer, and I really appreciate your honest opinion on it. And I can't be one to give my whole view on it as well, but you know, there has to be some changes out there, especially with COVID-19 and the way that police handle arrests today. I mean, I'll agree with that. I mean, the way that man died was horrible, and it should not have happened.
Yeah,
but in the same sense, I feel like the media, in a sense, is kind of driving our prejudice to extremes on both sides, and I feel like we need to look at them as a problem as well, because this is me personally. I feel like they're feeling it for their ratings.
I feel like the role of the media has never been to serve anyone other than themselves in reality.
I agree.
I think that's a very dangerous situation to be in, and we're all in the process of unwillingly and unwittingly giving away power to people that run our media outlets, and that's something that's quite dangerous. I think divisiveness and hate is never, ever constructive, and anything that increases that is always going to be a negative force. So I think the main thing to do is just find common ground with people that we love, and try and find common ground with people we don't know. And it can't be a bad thing. I think ultimately the really important thing is it's in our own best interests for human beings to come together and get on with each other. It is in our interest to do that. And anyone that tells you it's not probably has a different agenda than one that serves you.
That's why I like music, because I feel like that can be a bridge, especially in the world of heavy metal and rock and roll, because we're all about change and coming together and best of all, sticking it to the man.
Exactly right. So the whole point of
I'm going Jack Black.
Yeah, exactly. The whole point of music, and it's actually the theme of Semaphore as an album, is that it's us putting an idea into the world that other people can experience, and maybe they'll have the same experience that we do when we made it. Maybe they won't, but it's a way of communicating with people you're never going to meet. And I think that's a really powerful thing. So if two people on opposite sides of the world can listen to the same piece of music and have the same reaction, that's telekinesis, Kyle.
Exactly. All right, so Paul, we got time for one more quick question. I know you want to go and rest your mouth voice. So here we go. Who did you prefer listening to growing up? The Beatles or the Rolling Stones?
Beatles.
Bye. I'm out of here. Okay, so why the Beatles?
Neither, but yeah, Beatles just.
So why the Beatles?
A more diverse palette of influences.
All right, I can give you that. And hey, I love them just as much. Ever since COVID-19 hit, I've been listening to them nonstop, because I always thought they kind of like kept me sane in a sense,
Yeah, man, they're truly interesting.
Yeah, but I always go with the Stones more, because I loved how they were able to put their blues rock with reggae, pop, R&B, all different kinds of genres. They are probably more diverse in a sense as the years went on. Plus, my grandfather, who's a pastor today, actually got to open up for them in the 60s.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think what matters is that music is crazily subjective, and whatever, like I said earlier, whatever speaks to you at that time in your life is what's important to you. And nobody can possibly be wrong for loving a thing because it spoke to them.
Yeah. All right. So, Paul, thank you very much for talking with Uncivil Revolt. It was a real honor to talk. Well, a real pleasure.
Thank you very much.
I take away honor because, well, you're not a political figure. You're a musician, but it's always an honor to talk to a musician.
I'll try and keep it that way. I've got to sign off. That's amazing to talk to you, man.
Okay, this was Paul Visser from Black Orchid Empire. Be sure to go get their new album, Semaphore. It comes out this Friday. Paul, I'll see you when you get to the U.S. and we'll have a drink.
Thanks, man. Fantastic.
Bye-bye.
Bye.